One and the only Andre the Giant, and Andre, the wrestling fans, indeed the general public all over the entire world, welcome the opportunity to see you in person.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate that. And this I'm traveling all over the world, entire world, and I'm very happy to traveling all over the world, and we're very happy to see all those people.
Prime. Andre the Giant was meant to be untouchable. The night of the 26th of May, 1986, started like any normal Japanese tour stop. The Hiroshima Prefectural Gymnasium was packed. Fans had paid to see the most famous giant in the world stand tall once more. He had drawn crowds across Europe, Canada, and Japan for almost 2 decades. He had headlined Madison Square Garden. He had stared down the biggest stars of his time. On paper, he was still the 8th wonder of the world, but this night was different. Akira Maeda, a young Japanese star, was in the other corner. The match was supposed to be a normal show. It did not turn out that way. By the end of it, something inside the legend had cracked, and the whole world of pro wrestling could feel it. If you enjoy long-form deep dives like this one, take a quick second to use the hype feature and give this video some hype. It really does help. Now, back to the night that changed everything. This is the question we want to answer. Most modern fans only know the slow, broken Andre from the late 1980s. They know the WrestleMania 3 tape. They know the back brace. They know the man who could barely move. They believe that was always him. But the research tells another story. Before the body failed, there was a different Andre, a faster Andre, a man who could run, leap, and chain wrestle for a full hour without losing breath, a man whose name on a poster could sell out an arena in one afternoon. So, how good was Prime Andre really? Was he the unstoppable monster the legend claims? Or was the legend itself a clever trick of light, built by careful promoters and protected by careful booking? The honest answer sits in between the myth and the man. Prime was real, but the Prime was also managed. And the night in Hiroshima would expose just how thin the line between the two had grown. To understand Prime Andre, you first have to clear away what modern fans think they know. Most people picture him as he was at WrestleMania 3. In March 1987, he stood across the ring from Hulk Hogan in front of over 90,000 fans. Hogan slammed him. The crowd erupted. The torch passed. And the world watched a man who looked like he was barely holding himself up. By then, Andre was a wreck. His spine had been fused in surgery. His joints had stopped working as they should. His acromegaly had spread through every bone in his body. He had lost about 4 inches of his old height. He weighed over 500 pounds. He needed a brace just to stand upright. Even for the Princess Bride, he could not lift his co-star without help. The crew had to rig wires from the ceiling to take her weight. The man who once carried a whole industry could no longer carry an actress across a small set. This is the image stuck in most fans' heads. A slow, sad mountain ad. That version of Andre really did exist. The pain was real. The decline was real. But it was not the whole story. Go back further. Past the back brace, past the films, past the famous slam. Look at the tapes from the late 1960s and the 1970s. The man on those tapes is not the man you remember. He moves, runs, he throws drop kicks, he climbs the ropes, he chains, holds together with the timing of a trained European catch wrestler. He carries his weight like a lighter man. That is the version this story is about. The Prime version. The version most paying fans never saw because the promoters made sure of it. And here is where the truth turns sharper. The legend of unbeatable Prime Andre was real, but it was also shaped. He was protected. He was hidden. He was managed like a rare painting that the gallery only puts on show for a few days a year. Promoters knew that the more you showed a giant on television, the smaller he started to look. So, they kept him on a strict diet of short appearances. They cut down his moves. They controlled his bookings. They built a myth on top of the man. So, when we talk about Prime Andre's greatness, we have to ask a harder question. How much was the giant himself? How much was the system around him? How much was raw talent? How much was clever theater? Because the same protection that made him a legend also kept fans from ever truly seeing what he could do at full power. Even his build size was part of the trick. He was promoted at 7 feet 4 inches and 520 pounds. The posters said so. The announcers said so. Every magazine printed those numbers for years, but the photographs from his prime tell a different story. Stood next to Gorilla Monsoon, who was 6 feet 5, Andre looked closer to 7 feet flat. He may have been 6 feet 11 inches in his real prime. Still huge, still towering, but not quite the size the posters claim. This may sound like a small thing. It is not. The whole business of being Andre rested on the idea that he was a step beyond human. Every inch added to the legend. Every extra pound made the slam look more impossible. So the gap between build and real was not just marketing. It was the very source of the aura that paid his bills. The same goes for the moves he was allowed to do. In his his early years across France, Japan, and the United Kingdom, Andre showed off a full athletic style. He ran the ropes, he took bumps, he hit drop kicks, he worked with proper catch wrestling form. He was a real in-ring worker, not just a wall to bounce off. Then he reached the WWF in 1973, and Vince McMahon Sr. pulled the plug on most of that. McMahon told him not to drop kick anymore. He told him not to fly. He told him to stand tall and let the smaller men come to him. The reason was business. Drop kicks made the Giant look like just another wrestler. Standing still made him look like a god of the ring. This is the central tension of Prime Andre. He was as gifted as the legend says, but the legend itself was a curated thing. The promoters showed you a slice. They hid the rest to keep the slice valuable, and by the time the slice was all there was left, the real Prime was already slipping away. The body was breaking. The athletic version was gone, and fans were left holding the picture they could see, not the one that had been hidden from them. That is why this story matters. To find the true Prime, you have to look at the moments when the curtain slipped, the tours where the rules bent, and the matches where Andre was finally let off the leash. Those moments are where the truth lives. The story of Andre the Giant starts not in the bright lights of an arena, but in a small village in north-central France. He was born André-René Roussimoff on the 19th of May, 1946, in a town called Molien. His parents were not giants. They were of average height, with roots in Bulgaria and Poland. There were no warning signs in the family tree. He was simply a boy who would not stop growing. By the time he was 12 years old, he stood 6 feet 3 inches tall. He weighed more than 200 pounds. He was already the size of a grown man, and he was still a child. School was not built for a boy his size, and so he left at the age of 14. What followed was years of heavy work. He took jobs on local farms, he worked in factories, he lifted furniture for moving companies. There was no gym training, no coach, no proper nutrition plan, just lifting and pushing every day. His shoulders thickened, his back broadened, his grip turned into iron. By his late teens, he was a wall of natural strength. He had built it with labor. Modern athletes are made in expensive training centers. Andre was made in fields and warehouses. His body grew strong before anyone ever thought of putting him in a ring. The introduction to wrestling happened by chance. A local promoter in Paris spotted him on the street one day. He invited the young Roussimoff to train. The trainers were Michel Saulnier and Robert Lagayat, two respected names on the French wrestling scene. They taught him the basics of European catch wrestling, a tough style based on holds, counters, and pacing. He picked it up quickly. He moved well for his size. He had the timing that most big men never seem to find. On the 25th of January 1966, Roussimoff made his pro wrestling debut. The promoters gave him the ring name Géant Ferré, a nod to a French folk hero. He wrestled at night. During the day, he still worked as a mover to pay the bills. He was a giant in workman's clothes, learning the trade between shifts. Later that same year, he met a French-Canadian promoter and wrestler named Frank Valois. Valois saw something in Roussimoff that the local promoters had not yet understood. He saw a worldwide attraction. He took over as his business manager and began arranging international bookings. The first big stop was a tour of the United Kingdom in 1969 with joint promotions. British fans got their first look at the young giant. They saw a wrestler who could move, throw, and counter. Word started to travel. In 1970, Valois arranged the first trip to Japan. He went there for the International Wrestling Enterprise under a new name, Monster Roussimoff. Japanese crowds had never seen a foreigner this big walk through their curtain. He matched up with their hard-hitting style, where strikes are stiff and the pace stays high. He stood up to it. He delivered heavy headbutts. He used his weight as a weapon. The tours were a hit, but the trip to Japan also changed his life in a way nobody could see coming. Doctors during that tour gave him a formal diagnosis. He had acromegaly. This is a rare condition where the pituitary gland in the brain pumps out too much growth hormone. The result is that the body keeps growing past the point most people stop. Bones thicken, joints widen, hands and feet become huge. Over time, the strain on the heart and the spine becomes deadly. There was treatment available. Surgery to remove or reduce the gland was possible. Medication to control the hormone was possible. But Roussimoff said no. He chose to walk away from the operating table. His reason was simple and very human. He was scared that any change to his frame would damage his earning power. He had finally found a career. He had finally found a stage. He had finally found a name in lights. He could not bear the thought of losing it all on a hospital bed. From the outside, it looks like he traded his health for fame. From the inside, it was a young man choosing the only path that had ever opened up for him. He was not yet 25. He had spent his life being told he did not fit anywhere. Wrestling was the first thing that ever valued him. So he kept it. The price would come later, and it would be terrible. But for a few years, the choice paid off. His body kept growing in ways the the audience loved. He stayed lean. His proportions stayed close to normal. The disease had not yet started its full work on his joints. He was, by accident of biology and timing, the perfect wrestler for his size. A giant with the body of a strong, agile athlete before nature began to take it apart from the inside. And the wrestlers who shared a locker room with him in those years felt it. Names like William Regal, Robbie Brookside, and Dave Taylor would later speak openly about how much they took from his style. They studied his footwork. They studied his hands. They studied the way he linked one move into another without losing rhythm. He was not just a freak of size to them. He was a teacher. So, when we talk about how good Prime Andre really was, we have to start with this picture. A natural athlete built by hard labor. A trained catch wrestler taught by serious teachers. A young man whose disease, at this early stage, gave him a perfectly built frame for the work. He was not protected yet. He was not yet a myth. He was a real worker who could really wrestle. And that, more than anything else, is the part of the story that has been forgotten. In 1971, two Montreal-based promoters changed his life again. Edouard Carpentier and Paul Vachon brought him over to Canada. They put him into Grand Prix Wrestling, a hot Montreal promotion at the time. They gave him a new ring name to fit the local French-speaking market. He became Jean Ferret. His debut took place on the 1st of June 1971 at the Paul Sauve Arena. The reaction was instant. Fans had never seen anything quite like him before. He was billed at 6 feet 9 inches and 300 pounds, which was a modest set of numbers compared to what would come later, but it was already huge for the time. The Montreal scene took to him at once. Tickets moved fast. Posters featured his face. He became a local attraction within weeks. The promoters used him cleverly. They booked him in handicap matches. He would take on 2, 3, or even 4 opponents at a time. He would throw them across the ring. He would hold one in each arm. The goal was simple: show the strength, show the coordination, make the fans believe nobody on this earth could stand against him. Then came the moment that made Montreal a true proving ground. In 1972, the booking team set up a feud with another huge man, Don Leo Jonathan. This was billed as a battle of titans, and the crowd loved every step of it. The feud ran for months, building heat in every show. The blow-off was at the Montreal Forum. The arena was packed with over 16,000 fans on the night. For a regional French-Canadian promotion, this was a massive number. It proved that Andre was not just a curiosity. He was a draw. He could carry an arena on his name alone. This is where the story takes its next big turn. In New York, an old promoter named Vincent J. McMahon Sr. had been watching the Montreal tapes closely. He ran the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, the biggest promotion on the United States East Coast at the time. He had seen tape of Roussimoff in action, and he saw a problem. McMahon Sr. had a sharp business mind. He looked at the way Andre was being booked in Montreal, and he did not like what he saw. Andre was on television every single week. He was wrestling on every card. He was visible to the same fans over and over. McMahon Sr. knew what would happen if that pattern carried on. The fans would get used to him. They would stop seeing him as a giant. They would start seeing him as just another regular guy on the roster. The aura would die. So McMahon Sr. moved fast. He negotiated a deal to bring Andre over to the WWF. The debut came on the 24th of March 1973 in Philadelphia, where Andre teamed with Frank Valois to beat Bull Permetti in a handicap match. 2 nights later, on the 26th of March, Andre walked into Madison Square Garden for the very first time. He beat Billy Wolf with a big splash in under 7 minutes. The New York crowd was sold by the time he left the ring. McMahon Sr. gave him his final ring name. From this point on, Jean Ferret was gone. He would be Andre the Giant, and along with the new name came a complete change in how he would be used by the business. This is where the management of the legend really begins to take shape. McMahon Sr. built a careful plan around him. The plan had a few clear rules. The first rule was no overexposure. Andre would not stay in any one territory too long. He would roll into a town for a week or two, work a few big shows, sell out the building, then leave. By the time the fans grew used to him, he would already be gone. The aura would stay fresh. The myth would stay clean. The second rule was the loan system. Andre did not just wrestle for the WWF. He was loaned out to other promotions all across the country. He worked for the National Wrestling Alliance affiliates. He worked for the American Wrestling Association. He worked for New Japan Pro Wrestling in Asia. He moved between territories like a circus act, leaving sold-out crowds and stunned local heels in his wake. The third rule was the most important and the most negative for the in-ring product. McMahon Sr. told Andre to cut down on his athletic moves. No more drop kicks. No more flying off the second rope. No more taking real bumps. He could still do them physically. He had not lost the ability. But the order from above was clear. Stand tall, move slowly, let the smaller men try to hit you and fail. Look like a god in the ring, not a wrestler. This decision sits at the heart of the negative angle on Prime Andre. What most paying fans saw in the United States was a watered-down version of him. The full kit was sealed away because the business worked better that way. The booking protected his joints, which was kind to his body, but it also protected the mystery, which was kind to the bank account. Both reasons were valid. Both reasons also meant that the prime athlete most fans paid to see was never the prime athlete who was actually standing in the ring. The system worked. Andre became a household name. He sold out arenas across North America. Towns that had never sold out before sold out for him. Promoters in every territory begged for dates. The roving giant became the biggest box office act in the entire sport. McMahon Sr. had built a one-man monopoly on attraction, and Andre, for all his raw power, became part of a machine that decided exactly when, where, and how the world would see him. To find the true Prime Andre, you have to leave the United States behind. You have to follow him on his international tours. And above all, you have to look at his work in Japan with New Japan Pro Wrestling. In Japan, the rules were different. The booking philosophy was different. The audience expected something different. Japanese fans did not want a slow walking attraction. They wanted real matches. They wanted long matches. They wanted athletic contests with proper pacing, structure, and finishing sequences. The promotion behind much of this style was led by Antonio Inoki, who pushed a hard form of work known as strong style. Strong style asked for stiff strikes, real-looking holds, and matches that could go 30 minutes or more. This was the test bed for Prime Andre. He could not coast in Japan. He could not stand in the corner and let smaller men bounce off him. He had to actually wrestle, and the tapes show that he absolutely could. The first proof was his match against Strong Kobayashi on the 6th of May 1972 in Tokyo. This was the IWE World Series final, a best-of-three falls contest. Andre worked through the format with full focus. He used a range of suplex variations. He used deep mat control. He showed grappling skills that his United States bookings would never let him display. The match served as an early stamp on his ability to handle long, high-stakes, competitive formats. Then came Antonio Inoki. The Inoki series of matches across the 1970s formed the spine of Prime Andre's technical case. On the 7th of October 1976, in Tokyo, the two met in a singles match in the Tokon series. Inoki tried to counter Andre's size with drop kicks. Andre stayed standing. He used the bottom rope to choke Inoki. The pace was sharp throughout. The match ended in chaos when Andre headbutted the ring post, busted himself open, and bumped the referee. It was not a clean finish, but it was a real, committed performance from both men. 2 years later, on the 30th of May 1978 in Osaka, the two met again in the first MSG series. This time the match was slower and more detailed. Andre worked the limb with care. He screamed before each headbutt to build the suspense. He used the psychology of size against the speed and skill of Inoki. The match ended when Inoki won by count out after Andre got distracted, brawling with the cornermen on the floor. Again, the finish was messy, but again, what came before the finish was serious in ring work. Then we get to the most important proof of all, the Broadways. In professional wrestling, the Broadway is a 60-minute time limit draw. It is the ultimate test of conditioning in this sport. You cannot fake a 60-minute draw. You cannot rest your way through it. You have to fill the time with real action, real holds, and real pace. Your lungs have to hold up. Your legs have to hold up. Your timing has to hold up. It is the most honest match form in pro wrestling. Andre went the Broadway distance more than once during his prime. In 1976 in Chicago, he wrestled AWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Bockwinkel to a full 60-minute draw. Bockwinkel was one of the most respected technical workers of the era. He had no patience for filler. He demanded a partner who could match his pace from bell to bell. Andre matched it for a full hour. Then in November 1979, they did it all again in Chicago. Another 60 minutes, another draw. Two Broadways with the same opponent years apart. The cardio held, the technique held, the structure held. By any honest standard, this is elite world-class work. The same year, 1979, Andre traveled to Houston and stepped into the ring with Harley Race. Race was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion at that point. He was a tough, stiff worker who liked physical exchanges. The match went the full 60 minutes. Another Broadway, another draw against a sitting world champion. 3 60-minute draws against two of the toughest technical champions of the era. This is not the work of a slow attraction. This is not the work of a man who needs to be hidden by booking. This is the work of an elite heavyweight athlete who could run with the very best of his time. And his offense was not just a small set of power moves. In his prime, Andre had a real toolbox. He used the butterfly suplex, kicks, which takes timing and grip to land cleanly. He used high-angle body slams, where the opponent goes up almost vertical before being driven back down. He used the gut buster, a knee strike across the lower belly that needs control to be safe for the other man. His arsenal was much wider than fans remember. The United States bookings cut these moves out of the picture, but in Japan, they were on full display. His tag matches in Japan add even more weight to the case. He often teamed with Swede Hansen against top pairings like Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. He also worked tag matches against teams that featured Tatsumi Fujinami and Akira Maeda. These matches were not slow. They moved at a high tempo. They had clean tag work, well-placed false finishes, and crowd-pleasing sequences from start to finish. They stole shows. Andre, the man fans in the United States thought of as a slow-standing giant, was right in the middle of fast-paced tag classics in another country at the very same time. There is also the matter of his ring psychology. Andre worked as a brilliant heel. He knew how to mock his opponents. He used his size to tower over them between exchanges. He used the referee as a shield, hiding behind him at the right moments to set up a cheap shot. He used the count to his advantage, rolling out of the ring just slowly enough to mess with the babyface's rhythm. He understood the timing of crowd reaction. He understood how to make a smaller wrestler look brave by giving them just enough hope to keep the building alive. This is the work of someone who has thought deeply about what wrestling actually is. Now here is where the negative angle has to come back in. All of this is true. All of it is on tape. All of it is in the record books. But almost none of it was shown to the fans who paid to see Andre the most. The biggest United States crowds, the headline crowds at Madison Square Garden, the touring crowds across the territories, mostly got the protected version. The Broadway version stayed in Chicago and Houston and Tokyo. The full athletic version stayed in Japan and a few select special bookings. The fans who paid the most for tickets actually got the least of the real wrestler. So, how good was Prime Andre really? The honest answer is that he was a complete and elite worker by any measure. The harder answer is that the system around him decided how much of that work the public would ever see. The greatness was real, but the greatness was rationed. And rationed greatness, no matter how high in quality, is still greatness on someone else's terms. While the legend was being built up in the ring, another story was already in motion behind the scenes. This was the story of his body, and it was not a happy one. Start with the build numbers. Andre was advertised at 7 feet 4 inches tall and 520 pounds. This is what the posters said. This is what the announcers said. This is what magazines printed in every preview. The numbers became part of the brand. They were repeated so often that even today, many people still pass them on as straight fact. But the photographs tell a different story. There are clear shots of Andre standing next to the wrestler and broadcaster Gorilla Monsoon. Monsoon was a known 6 feet 5. Andre stands above him in the photos, but not by the 11 inches the build numbers would suggest. The visible gap is closer to 5 or 6 inches. Working from that comparison, his real prime height sits closer to 6 feet 11 or 7 feet flat. Still huge, still towering, but not the 7 feet 4 the posters promised. This is not a small detail. It is a window into how the legend actually worked. The billing was inflated on purpose to make him feel more special. The extra inches and the extra pounds were not data. They were marketing copy. The man himself was already amazing. The numbers turned him into a full myth, yet even the real numbers were brutal on his body. He still had to drag close to 400 pounds around the ring every night. He still wore a size 22 United States shoe. His bone mass was off the charts, and every single match added small amounts of damage to joints that were already strained by his condition. The bumps, the slams, the falls, the running, all of it stacked up over the years. The decay was already in motion through the 1970s. By the time the world saw the broken version in the late 80s, the slide had been quietly happening for well over a decade. Travel made all of it worse. Andre worked a punishing schedule. He was on the road close to 300 days a year at his peak. The world he traveled in was not built for him. Planes were the worst part. Commercial seats were too narrow. He often had to sit sideways across an entire row to fit his frame. Every bit of turbulence pressed into his already strained spine. The aisles were too tight. The bathrooms were impossible to use. On long flights, including the trips out to Japan, the flight attendants had to hold up blankets in the cabin so he could relieve himself into a bucket. There was no dignity in that, but there were no other options. The world had not been built for someone his size, and he was paying the cost every time he flew. Cars were not much better. Standard 1970s sedans had no room for his legs. On long drives between territory shows, his knees pressed into his chest for hours. He arrived at venues with a stiff neck and a sore back, ready to do a match. The only real relief came from a custom-built van that he eventually used, but for years he simply suffered suffered through every long drive. Even small daily tasks turned into problems. His fingers were so wide that dialing a phone was a real struggle. He would press multiple numbers at once by accident. So he kept a pencil with him and used the rubber end to punch in the numbers one by one. A small thing, a telling thing. A-E. The man who looked like a god in the ring could not work a phone like a normal person. Then came the pain. The acromegaly was busy inside him every day. His bones kept slowly growing. His joints kept slowly grinding. His spine kept slowly compressing. By the late 70s and into the early 80s, there was no part of his frame that did not hurt. He woke up in pain. He worked through pain. He traveled through pain. He went to sleep in pain. The medical world of the time had no good answer for him. Standard painkillers existed, but they were dangerous for a body his size. A normal dose could undertreat him. A bigger dose could shut his organs down. The drugs had not been tested for someone his weight. The risk of accidental overdose was real. The risk of liver damage was real. So the clinical route was mostly closed. What was left? Alcohol. And here we run into one of the most retold parts of the Andre legend. The drinking stories are everywhere in pro wrestling history. Oh, they are funny on the surface. They become much darker when you understand why they happened. The most famous story involves a sitting of 156 beers. Wrestlers Dusty Rhodes, Mike Graham, and Michael Hayes have all confirmed that Andre once drank 156 beers in a single evening. The number sounds made up. It is not. It is on record from multiple sources who were actually there in the room. Then there is the speed record. On another night, Andre is said to have downed 108 bottles of beer in just 45 minutes. The bottles were the 330 milliliter kind, the standard small bottle. The time is the part that stuns people. 45 minutes, more than 2 bottles a minute, every minute without stops. All of this brings us back to where we started. The Hiroshima Prefectural Gymnasium, the 26th of May 1986, the night when the legend met something it could not control. By the middle of 1986, Andre was 40 years old and the decline was no longer slow. His spine was visibly curving. He had lost nearly 4 inches in height. He measured closer to 6 feet 9 now, down from his prime peak. His joints were swollen. His knees ached even when he stood still. He was just months away from a major back surgery that would change his life forever. The opponent that night was Akira Maeda. Maeda was 27 years old. He was a rising star with a serious reputation. He worked in shoot style, a form of wrestling designed to look as much like a real fight as possible. He threw stiff kicks. He used real submission holds. He pushed back when other wrestlers tried to take it easy on him. He was also known as a man who was difficult to do business with. Veterans complained about him. By the time he was booked against Andre, he had a reputation as a problem. The match should have been straightforward. Both men had a plan. Both men knew what was expected. Then everything went wrong before the bell even rang. Andre arrived at the building heavily intoxicated. He was in serious physical pain. The drinking that night had not been social. It had been pain management. He could barely move without effort. His body was running on alcohol and bad nerves. The plan for the match started to fall apart before either man left the locker room. Backstage politics added pressure. The finish was not agreed. The pace was not agreed. Tensions were high. When the bell finally rang, the trouble began at once. Maeda came forward as planned. He started throwing his real kicks. Andre did not sell them. He stood still. He used his bulk to fall on Maeda when he came close, smothering him with his weight rather than working through the spots. Maeda grew frustrated quickly. The kicks turned harder. He started peppering Andre's compromised knees and legs with full force strikes. These were not worked. These were real shots landing with intent. Andre tried to stay upright. He staggered. He backed away from the strikes. He could not lift his legs fast enough to check the kicks. His body simply would not respond. The crowd started to feel the shift in the building. They could see this was no longer a normal match. The atmosphere went strange. Then Maeda found his moment. He shot in low and grabbed a single leg. With a hard pull, he took the giant off his feet. Andre went down on his back. He could not get back up. His weight, his pain, and his drinking all worked against him at once. Observers later compared him to a turtle that had been flipped onto its shell. He was prone. He could not roll over. He could not lift himself off the canvas. The most feared man in pro wrestling was stuck on the mat in front of a Japanese crowd, with a younger man circling him. Andre tried to end it. He lay there and told Maeda to pin him. He gave him the win. He offered him the easy finish. Maeda refused. He would not take a compromised victory. He stayed on his feet, kicking at the legs, waiting for something else. The chaos finally ended when Antonio Inoki himself walked down to the ring. As the founder of New Japan, his word was final. He stepped in. The match was thrown out in a state of confusion. Andre eventually left the ring. The crowd left the building. The story was already spreading before anyone reached the car park. The fallout fallout was huge. Maeda was suspended by New Japan the following year after he delivered a real shoot kick to Riki Choshu that broke the orbital bone in Choshu's face. Maeda left the company after the suspension. He helped form a new promotion called the Newborn UWF. That promotion would shape the future of pro wrestling in Japan and play a role in the rise of modern mixed martial arts. The night against Andre was the moment when his reputation as a shoot fighter went global. For Andre, the Hiroshima match marked the end of his time as a serious in-ring athlete. He had the back surgery soon after. The operation eased some pain, but also limited his mobility for good. By the time the world watched WrestleMania 3 in March 1987, Andre was already the broken version. Hogan slammed him. The crowd erupted. The torch passed. Most modern fans freeze that single image in their minds and stop there. It is the easiest version to remember. It is also the smallest version of him by far. The real story is much bigger and harder to hold in one hand. He was, in his true prime, an absolute anomaly. A man who carried close to 400 pounds and still moved like a much smaller athlete. He could throw a drop kick. He could chain hold. He could go an hour with a world champion and not break a sweat. He could sell out the Montreal Forum, Madison Square Garden, and arenas across Japan. He helped build the box office model that the modern wrestling business still uses today. He was not just a slow attraction. He was an elite worker who happened to be born inside a giant's body. But the prime was also managed. The billing was inflated. The athletic moves were cut down. The roving schedule kept him out of sight long enough to keep the mystery alive year after year. The legend the world fell in love with was not exactly the wrestler that stepped between the ropes most nights. The promoters shaped the picture with care, and the body underneath was breaking under the weight of the act long before anyone watching at home could see it. The night with Maeda showed where the line ran. The body could not keep up with the legend anymore. The drinking that had been an anesthetic became a weakness in the ring. The aura cracked in public, and yet the respect remains. The sacrifice was real. He gave his joints, his spine, and in the end, his life to the work. He drew real money in towns that had never known sold-out shows. He set a benchmark for big man wrestling that nobody since has matched. Prime Andre the Giant was a one-of-one. He was the moment when size and skill met for the only time in this sport's long history. That benchmark still stands tall today.